Welcome to the Village Green NBTV show on our city and what's going on in the environment. I'm Nancy Gardner, your host. Today we're going to be talking to a young man who's doing something pretty extraordinary. He's a product of Newport Beach, but he is branching wide to try and improve the lives of a number of people, which that's always exciting to hear about. And then we're going to go, well, actually, I've been promised that I will be able to walk on water, and I'm not being blasphemous, but we're going to go to the reservoir and talk about the cover and water conservation there. So let's get started. I'm here with Brandon Rus. Brandon grew up here, and he's into some really neat things, but let's talk a little about your background. So you are a local boy.
I am. Born and raised in Newport Beach, and spent most of my childhood, like most people from here, growing up in the ocean. Did junior lifeguards, played water polo at Colonel Mar High School. So my entire life was based around the beach and respecting it, learning from it. Yeah.
Okay, and so then you went to college.
I did.
And chose a major.
So I went to school on the East Coast. I studied biology. Always wanted to be a marine biologist growing up, so it was pretty obvious of what I was going to study in college. Studied Wake Forest, and then from there went to school in South America, and then there grad school in Miami.
Okay, so he's been around. You sound like my college career, sort of a little bit here, a little bit there.
Of course.
But now you're living in Mexico.
Yes.
So tell us how that happened.
So the origin of that, like a lot of other people from this area, from Newport, I grew up going down to Baja to go fishing. My dad started going down there in the early 80s, so that was really a early indicator of travel for me. We would go every year to fish, twice a year, and since I was really little, I developed a very fond appreciation for the area. And all my studies in sustainability and fisheries really took me back to Baja. That really was the first place that I was able to see everything I was learning firsthand, understand it, and also get a sense of appreciation for Latin America and other countries and how they operate. So that really is what was initiating in my passion down there, and I almost just felt obliged to carry my work down there.
All right, so you're thinking you want to do something to save the world, of course.
Of course.
And you think that Mexico is a likely spot, particularly Baja, because it helps to have a familiarity with an area if you're trying to do something. So then, what happened? How did you end up exactly where you are?
So that's where it gets fun. Grew up going down to Cabo, which most of us know it's a major tourist destination, but where my real research and work was cultivated is a very tiny fishing community named Agua Verde.
Now, is that on the...
It's on the Gulf side.
Okay.
So it's about, I want to say, I'm going to get this wrong, but I want to say a couple hundred miles north of Cabo. So it's just south of Laredo. It's a community of about 200 people, about 60 families, and I was dropped off there after graduating college. And my whole goal there was to learn how to be a field scientist. So what I wanted to do was integrate myself in the community, learn how the community lived, and really gain the trust and familiarity with this community so that as a scientist, I could get a better understanding of what the fisheries perspective was from the point of view of the people who depend on the fisheries the most. So from there, I spent about a month and a half, and then I went down to La Paz, where I met various researchers, talked about various ideas of working with these fishermen and incorporating the entire community. So be it the youth, the fishermen, and the family in general. So my background in Baja has kind of taken me throughout the peninsula to get a better sense of how it all works.
All right, and then one of the things you must have found out, since we're going to get into that, but it wasn't all working necessarily.
No, so I had no particular job or goal or activity when I was in Agua Verde. It really was just to learn about the lifestyles, and then from there, when I went down to La Paz, I worked construction in aquaculture. So got a bit of understanding of how aquaculture works. That is one of the more, I guess you'd say, obvious solutions to overfishing is grow our own fish. We don't have to catch it. And from that, I learned of all the upfront cost, all the potential externalities, be it using antibiotics, other potentially harmful kinds of ways to grow fish. So that is what brought me to the idea of Conserva Collective, of working with seaweed. It's a lot more cost effective, it's a lot more beneficial to the environment, and it is a lot more readily available to incorporate a wider audience than aquaculture.
Okay, so I can just see the faces out there going, huh? What are we talking about here?
All over the
How do we
place.
get from fish to seaweed? But there was a method to your madness.
Yes.
All right.
More or less. We're still discovering it. So the whole thesis behind my project is that working away from overfishing through education, we have the ability to empower these fishing communities as innovators and entrepreneurs. That's where seaweed comes into play. Seaweed is one of the longest harvested and cultivated crops in the history of humanity. Not in Mexico or Latin America, but in Asia and other regions, predominantly in the Indian Ocean. So looking at that model, I figured we can adapt that to Baja California with these communities that otherwise don't have many economic opportunities and are looking for them. Because the fishing is depleting and because a lot of the resources needed to fish are expensive, be it gasoline, be it rods and reels, the tackle, the equipment, everything when you really think about it to catch fish, and it's not reliable. So what is something that is bountiful and readily available to harvest and to potentially make money off of? Seaweed. So that's where the idea comes in. Let's look at different uses of seaweed. Let's educate the community to harvest seaweed, to make certain products, whatever it is, and then we can kind of encompass that into this larger project of education, alternative sources of income, and marine conservation.
Well, I think that the alternative sources of income are obviously critical because we say, oh, you need to stop overfishing. And I go, okay, well, how do I feed my family?
Exactly. So that really is what I wanted to address because my background in academia and my background in science, so much of it was revolved around data. As a scientist, you have a hypothesis, you test that hypothesis, and you either prove it or disprove it. And a lot of times you leave it at that. And there's a disconnect. You have these very fascinating scientific findings, and then nothing's done about it. So my whole goal was, okay, we have this relatively obvious, in my opinion, scientific data that overfishing exists. We have an overabundance of seaweed, and we have this community that doesn't really have any middle ground to do anything else. So why don't we kind of put this all together and make a project out of it, find these alternative sources of income, utilize science to benefit the community?
Okay, so the obvious thoughts are, oh, let's see, sushi. Yeah, okay,
Totally.
a lot of wraps there. Or I know that sometimes they use seaweed for biofuel.
Mm-hmm.
But you came up with something else that I would not have thought of. But, yes, go ahead.
Well, I guess to bring in another interesting component to it, so the seaweed we're working with is sargassum. So
Not sarcasm.
no, and let the jokes fly. Sargassum is, if you are current in environmental changes and the climate crisis, has become an increasingly invasive seaweed in Southern California and in southern Mexico, and the Yucatan, which is the other side.
How perfect then. Let's get rid of something that's not good for our particular waters. And, okay, so step one, all right?
Exactly. So that is where it gets a little tricky because, as you mentioned, with seaweed, we think of it, used in sushi, potentially other kinds of food outsources, as well as biofuels. Sargassum, though, has no commercial value. There's no use for it right now, which is why it's such a problem. For me, I don't know why, but somewhat seemingly obvious is to make soap.
Oh, of course.
I mean, it's
Of
just what you
course.
would do with sargassum.
I see seaweed here, soap. I instantly think about it. Yes.
So the reason I wanted to pursue soap, and it was this was an idea in grad school that I kind of pursued in a satirical way almost, that actually just manifested and became a reality. But the reason that soap is really interesting is if you think about it, everybody uses soap.
Uh-huh.
And the product itself, if done right, has zero waste.
That's true.
Zero waste, including packaging.
You can package it correctly.
So the packaging that we use is recycled paper. All the ingredients in the soap, in addition to the seaweed we harvest, are all local ingredients, all locally sourced. So it's almost a representation, a scientific concoction of the local environment. And it's extremely marketable. So that's why I really focus on the soap, it's a tangible representation of the project we're working on. It's something that can be marketed to everybody, and it's something that all generations, both genders, anyone can get excited about. It doesn't exclude anyone.
Uh-huh.
So that's really what was so interesting is Sargassum seaweed, which nobody really knows about,
Uh-huh.
can all of a sudden become this household product that is associated to a larger story.
The new power berry or something.
The new goji berry, something like that. Yeah, totally.
Okay, so you have now started something,
Yes.
and it is called?
So the company I've established is named Conserva Collective. The name derives from combining Spanish with English, conserva being conservation in Spanish, collective obviously being a collective group of efforts, group of people, ideas, all the above.
Well, and also, I know from my visits to Baja, many of the agricultural things particularly, are collectives anyway. Did they have a fishing collective there?
So they're called co-ops.
Okay.
They're called co-ops, but it's definitely a similar concept. So that was another reason that the name collective stuck, because working with these communities, they are pretty autonomous. So they're self-reliant, not to say that they have a lot of resources to work with, but it's already a construct of community operation that they're familiar with. And I think it's, in a way, kind of a form of system that we could learn from as well. How could we band together for a cause as opposed to banding together with some kind of hierarchical system?
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of the idea there as well.
So you are making soap.
We're making soap.
Do you have different kinds of soap? How does it work?
So starting very small, I didn't want to get overwhelmed with the actual line of products. I didn't want to become a cosmetic brand. So we have 3 soaps. They're essentially the same, just different scents. The names of the scents are representative of the different beaches that the ingredients come from.
Ah, okay.
So just to be a little bit more intimate with the environment, to be a little bit more, pay homage to the overall place. The soaps are made with hand-picked ingredients. So the sargassum is harvested either by students, volunteers, or researchers participating in the travel component of Conserva. The other ingredients are hand-picked and locally sourced from Baja. The soaps are made by local women, 2 sisters, entirely handmade, artisanal batched. And the paper is printed in a local orphanage in La Paz. So we're trying to incorporate community efforts in every component of the project.
So, in other words, you have become an entrepreneur, even though you thought you were being a scientist.
Yeah. And that actually was a goal from the start of it, was how could we transcend science being an extremely important, crucial understanding, especially today with the environmental movement. How can we make that relatable to everybody else? So that really is the goal of Conserva, is how can we transform this pretty grim data of overfishing, climate change, displacement from all of this into a more heartwarming, optimistic goal.
Okay, that sounds great. If I know that you've been up here for a couple of months looking for new markets for your product, and maybe some people out there say, oh, I'd love to get some for an event I'm doing, or I've got a spa that I would love to stock it on. So how do they find out more about it?
We do have a website.
All right.
The website is conservacollective.com, straight through. We do have a Shopify site on the website as well. And part of what I am working on while I am up here in California is actually placing products in various stores and hotels. So my goal is in the next couple months, in addition to ordering it offline, you'll be able to find it in various stores in LA, San Francisco, San Diego, and Orange County. And then the longer term goal is to establish a monthly subscription where you will be a member, you will be getting a monthly shipment of soaps in addition to a newsletter of the progress of the project in Baja.
So we've got soap. Are there plans for maybe additional product lines at some point?
So we are also working down in Baja on producing compost.
Okay.
So incorporating the seaweed, washing it, drying it, incorporating other biodegradable components. We have various small-scale biodynamic farms down there that we're working with. I don't foresee that being a commercial product in the near future. So right now we're really sticking with soap and launching expeditions to get people down to learn about the environment firsthand, harvest the seaweed, and learn about all the amazing protected areas in the region as well.
So you've got a couple of women involved, and you've got an orphanage involved, so we're getting this group now. But do you see it expanding, say, to other villages, or how do you see it growing?
Totally. So wanting to keep it as fundamental as possible, because I definitely foresee this as a prototype for other regions, starting off in Mexico. So looking down in Tulum and Quintana Roo and Yucatan, where sargassum is a massive problem on the beaches, and they're actually investing a lot of federal money from the Mexican government to clean it up. And in addition, sargassum is becoming increasingly invasive in most of the subtropical oceans. So the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Indian, all around the equator. If you look at these various island communities, developing countries, coastal areas, this is an issue. So the ultimate goal is if we can prove this a successful project here in Baja, we can replicate that concept throughout the globe.
Well, this is a great project. I'm delighted to meet someone who's got the
Thank you.
the energy, but also the thoughtfulness to really carry it off. And I really urge you, if you have an event or if you have a store or you know somebody, to go to the website and let's really make this a success, because this is so many times we think so grandly in such a but this is a real think globally, act locally.
And that's exactly what I think is the potential of this. Is it is something that a lot of us may not think about, but when you piece it all together, it makes sense. Nothing is particularly complicated. So if we're able to implement this here, my goal is to hopefully inspire others to think this way in other areas as well, with any kind of product or any kind of crop or any kind of local resource that we haven't capitalized on in a sustainable, thoughtful way.
Well, I think that's I'm very excited, and the best of luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. No, I appreciate it. And it's been humbling to have people catch on to this and understand it and want to capitalize on it. So I'm very thankful for this.
Well, good. All right, thank you. I am here with, first of all, we're here at the Big Canyon Reservoir, which a lot of people don't know exists, or if they've heard of it, but they don't know exactly where it is. And you can drive by and not be at all aware that there's something there. And I'm here with Casey, Mark, and Stefan, all of whom are involved in this project. And so, what's the first step? What should we know about the reservoir?
Well, the thing I like about it right now is its 60th birthday.
Oh!
Yeah, it opened in the year 1959. It was finished in 1958, but this is probably one of the most important parts of our water system here, and you can see our big, lovely sign up there. Ed, hopefully you can capture that too. And we're going to take you into the depths of the station here and show you how this works, and Casey's going to tell us all about it, but this is important, and you'll get a chance to walk on water today.
I promised them that they would see that. So this is neat, and it is important, because how much water does this hold?
Total capacity 600 acre foot.
Okay, and acre foot give us like a football field or what?
So an acre foot is 325,829 gallons.
Okay. That's a lot of water.
A lot of water.
So it supplies a house. If we could, everything, the delta went down, all that sort of thing, how long could we as a city survive on just the water in here? A week?
If the reservoir was full, we could last in the summertime probably about 2 weeks, in the wintertime about 30 days.
Okay, so we don't want anything else to happen, but it's nice to know there's a little bit of a fallback. All right, so lead on, McDuff, as they say, and show us the workings.
Yes, and this is actually monitoring the chemical levels in the water. So in order to treat the water, we dose it with monochloramines, which is a combination of aqueous ammonia and sodium hypochlorite. We do it at a 5-to-1 ratio, and so these analyzers are constantly monitoring those levels. We have it pre-programmed. We have a whole SCADA system that monitors everything, and we have everything programmed, dialed into exactly what we want, and these analyzers will tell us in real time what the chemical levels are in the water, and if there's anything that gets out of sync or out of whack, we have someone on call 24/7 that's also monitoring this, and these can also send out alarms to us that let us know if anything isn't within the ranges that we want.
All right, so I think everybody's always a little leery when they hear about chemicals.
Yes.
What are these chemicals for? What do they accomplish?
So this ensures if there were to be any organics, anything at all in the water, these essentially attack that and keep the drinking water clean. So the water that we receive, about 77% of our water right now is coming from wells in Fountain Valley, and that water is relatively free from impurities that could actually go directly into the system. And then we also get water from Metropolitan Water District, which gets their water from the Colorado River and from the State Water Project up north. They treat their water before it comes to us. The water we get from the wells we pump directly out of the ground, and that goes to another facility on the other side of town. But these chemicals, when we add them in there, it ensures that the drinking water is safe. When it goes out into the system, it keeps what we call a residual in the system. So, and we can monitor that residual. So we know that if the residual level ever dropped, due to low usage in the system, anything like that, we always know what's going on. But the chemicals ensure that the drinking water is always safe.
Right. And I know that we put out, is it annually or biannually that we put out a report on the water that people drink?
Yeah, we put an annual report out too. It was mailed to every single water customer. It just went out in June. So it tells you all the data about everything that was measured in the water system. And we do over, let's see, what was the number? Over a 4-year period, we did about 5,000 different tests in the water system. But like Casey said, these are analyzing all the time. And the chemicals he's talking about is what's called disinfection. It's just basic amount of chlorine to make sure bacteria doesn't grow in the water system. That's really what it is.
But you test for a lot more in terms of that report, because I know things like arsenic and lead and all those things that we really are frightened of. And we always have good report cards, fortunately.
Absolutely, yeah. We test on all of those. There's probably over 100 different constituents that are tested for. And then we report all the levels and if there's any exceedances above goals. But everything that we've tested in the last year and years prior to that have all been below the maximum levels. So.
Which is, it's tested a lot more than some of the water that's in bottled water, right?
Yes. And our groundwater is also, the groundwater basin is managed by the Orange County Water District, and they perform sampling as well. So they actually almost about every month, every 2 months. So they will go out and collect samples directly from the wellhead, and they sample for thousands of different constituents. So they're constantly monitoring the groundwater, not just from our wells, but from all the wells in Orange County. And then Metropolitan Water District is also testing their water. So we're getting our water sampled and tested and everything like that before it even reaches us. And then we just add the chemicals into the water for a last little bit of disinfection before it goes out into the system.
So there's a lot of safe redundancy in the program.
Absolutely. I mean, the key to water system is all about redundancy. Whether it's a pipe that we have a problem with over here, we need to get the water the other way to come, and it's this continuous testing. It's the 24/7, staff. It's all of the technology and the computers. It's the pumps, it's the pipes, it's the electricity. It's all those components that make it work and make it redundant. So if this facility were to go down temporarily, we can pump water from the other end of town. If that end of town goes out of water, then we have all the backup water here that we can pump water from.
Oh, great. All right. So what else do we get to see? Okay, so we're in the basement.
Yes. What we call the basement of the reservoir. So these are all the pipelines that come in and out of the reservoir. So you can see right here, this main pipe right here, this is our effluent pipe going out. So we can actually feed the entire city from this reservoir.
Wait, effluent sounds horrible to me. So this is the outflow.
Outflow.
All right. It has nothing to do with the sewage system.
No, this is the outflow. So we can feed the entire city from this station right here coming out this line. So it can flow out, and we have 5 pressure zones within the city. So this directly gravity feeds into 2 of the pressure zones, and then it goes out here into some of the pump stations we have out here, and then the water can get pumped to the rest of the city. We recently completed a large project down here where this section of pipe that you see right here was actually removed, and we put in a chemical mixing system. So on the other side of the pipe, both chemicals that we dose the water with are injected into the system, and then there's actually a static mixer down here where the chemicals hit the static mixer and flow around the mixer so the chemicals mix together. And then during low flow situations, there are 3 water jet mixers over here that actually create more turbulence in the water, so we know we're getting a good even flow and distribution of the chemicals into the system before it splits off into the different zones.
Casey, you're pretty amazing, all the stuff you know. You don't even have to hesitate when you talk about it. We're down now on the very floor of the basement, and this gives you an idea of how big the pipes are. They're taller almost than I am if they were at ground level. So one of these is the outflow and one of these is the inflow, or how's it work?
This is the outflow and this is the inflow. And so something that's unique about our system for the inflow, this is tied directly into a Metropolitan Water District connection, so we can fill this reservoir with Metropolitan Water District water. But the pipe that you see that's up above our head, we can actually pump well water from the pump station, the 16th Street Reservoir pump station on the other side of town. And when that overcomes demand in the system, the water will actually come up over this and into the inflow. So we can fill this reservoir with well water and with Metropolitan Water District water. That gives us that backup redundancy, so we can always, in times of emergency, if there was something happening at the wells, we always have the Metropolitan line, or if something happens with Metropolitan, we have the well line. So we can always keep this reservoir filled and functioning so we can meet the demands of the city.
Let's talk a little bit about cost. Well water, is that cheaper than Met water?
It is, yeah. Well water is a lot less expensive. It's about half the cost of metropolitan water, too, so that's why we prefer it. And we also prefer it because it's a better quality water, too, coming straight from the ground here in our basin. It's some of the best water you can get. And so we use it.
We should do a marketing campaign. I mean, it's, like bottled at the source. You hear all these commercials about the bottled water, and here we've got the same thing.
We do. I mean, in fact, there's people that do bottle the water that just comes straight out of the ground from there too, as well too. It's great stuff too. And so we use the maximum that we're allowed to use because there are rules in place on how much we can pump. It's a managed basin. Of course, we don't want to over pump it because then that becomes a problem. So that's why you got to have these system components. We can take in the different sources at the different time. And like Casey's saying, this is the water going out, and then this is that new feature Casey was talking about, where it sends basically a little whirlpool in here too. So when we're putting in the chlorine, for the last bit of water as it's going out, it mixes in properly. So yeah, it's a cool system. And I have one more thing I want to show you as we walk over here, Nancy.
All right.
Okay. Nancy, I want you to zoom in on this over here and take a look and see what that says there.
It says 1958.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it is amazing that you think that the pipes would corrode or something.
No, I mean, these pipes are in great shape, and we constantly are inspecting them and cleaning them. We've disassembled these when we built these, so we got to look inside of them as well too. And they're still in great shape and have many more years of service. That's why you have to be specific about what infrastructure to replace when, And so we have these formulas. We have a master plan. We know what's next, what we anticipate. It's not a perfect system, but it's a calculated and thoughtful system.
Oh, very good. All right, and now we're going to go back up.
Let's go back up. All right.
We are here at the reservoir itself, the water part of it, although you can't see the water because it's covered. And why do we cover it?
Well, we cover it so for evaporation loss, we cover it so it's protected, from birds and anything else that's going to get in there, and it just keeps our water quality that much higher and better. Yeah.
So the cover, is it flexible? I mean, because it's not always constant, the amount of water is in there. So does it go up and down, or how does it work?
It does, yeah. You can see the elevation levels that are right here. So as we put more water in or take water out, it's a floating cover. And so we're going to actually go out there and float. Casey, you know more about the materials than I do. What kind of material is it?
It's a CSPE, so it's actually a pretty thin material, but it is tough. It's a nicer material than we had on there previously. It's definitely, it's like walking on a big waterbed.
Okay, yeah, because I know that we did have a little issue with the previous one. It didn't last as long as we had hoped. And so how long should a cover last, do you think, about?
Typically, it's about 20 years.
Oh, that's a good long time then.
Yeah, before, what happens is the sun, sun breaks down things, and that first cover that we had years ago too, the sun was just breaking it down much quicker. And so this one is in much better shape and it's lasting, and with regular maintenance we should get to 20 years. So
Talking about maintenance, what do you do with it?
So at anywhere from 2 to 4 times a month, we actually have our employees will walk out here, and air builds up under the cover, so we get all the air out. Any debris that's come from the wind or birds dropping on it or anything, we'll go out there and we'll actually clean it if any rocks or anything got on it. So we walk it and we do a visual inspection. So we have at least 3 people that come out here at once. We typically don't have any less than 3 people walking it at a time. So you'll walk in grids, and they'll walk the entire cover, inspect it to make sure there's no small holes or anything going on, and get any debris off of it, and then note anything, and then we come out and make repairs if we have to.
Why does it matter if there's an air bubble?
You want to get all the air out. Air can build up, and that's what you see. There's all these vents out here. You want to get the air out because you want it to be floating on the water. You want to make sure if there are any pinholes or anything like that, if it's floating, you're never going to see any of those pinholes because the water's not going to come up or anything.
Okay.
But you always want to get all the air out because eventually the entire thing could fill up with air if you're not doing it. So you always want to keep it floating on the water.
So if you did find, say, just a little pinhole thing, do you have like a patch or?
Yeah, if it's a small pinhole, there's actually some floats under the reservoir that you can kind of step on and walk, and so you can get that material up out of the water. And then, you put a small patch on there. And if there's if the seams ever were to come apart or anything like that, we can repair those the same way as well.
Okay. All right, let's venture.
all right, let's do it.
All right, well, we are here on the surface, and it's like a great big giant waterbed, as you said, and you can feel the water under it. And so this is exactly what you do when you're doing the inspection.
Yes. Yeah, like I said, we'll have teams of 3 going, and they just walk it back and forth, inspecting all of the seams and picking up any debris that we find. And then usually every few years we'll come out here and we'll actually hose off the cover and get all the debris off. And these floats that you see right here that go all the way around, these are actually rainwater troughs. So there's cover material that actually goes down, and when it rains, the water will collect in those troughs and it'll spread out, and there's 8 pumps on the cover. You can see one of the pumps right there, and it'll pump all of the rainwater off of the cover, goes up and around, and then goes into our settling basin that we have on the south end of the reservoir.
Oh, so we clean that up and it goes into the groundwater, right? Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. I mean, so if it rains, right, we're not going to store that water here, so we're going to send that off site. Yeah.
Okay. So then I notice that this is slightly raised, and this would tell us we go from 280. Well, no, 275 to 70. What's the lowest there? 265, and that's acre feet, or?
This is actually the elevation, so it's
elevation.
the MSL,
Okay.
how far the water level is above sea level.
And so 300 is the maximum?
No, we can actually go a little bit higher than that.
Okay.
So to get to the maximum, you'll actually be where those 2 vent stacks are. That would be about the maximum level of the reservoir. You can actually see near that large vent that's over there, you see a smaller stainless steel one that's down below. That's actually right above the overflow line of the reservoir. So if the reservoir ever got to that, there's a spillway underneath there. So the reservoir, if it got that high, would go into the spillway. So you never
So for some reason, the rain system didn't work and the rainwater kept building up, it would eventually just go overflow.
That wouldn't. If rainwater it would overtop. But I'm talking about the water underneath the cover.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, if it ever got filled too high for some reason, or if there was some kind of an emergency, there was a spillway. So you wouldn't overtop the reservoir.
Well, I know that one of the things that was always so pleasing to me was the farsightedness of previous councils in terms of water sustainability in Newport Beach. I mean, we have several sources, and I know that we have also been on the sort of lending end at times when I think Laguna got in trouble one time, and were able to give them a little bit of water. We do that. Is that what the cities do? Is there a common agreement, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, so we have interconnections. So we have connections to all of our neighboring cities. So if we need water in an emergency, We can ask them if they need water in an emergency, we can give it to them as well too. We have an agreement with Laguna Beach where we actually send them some of our well water as well too, because they asked us and we try to be a good neighbor, and they pay their share of that cost, and so the city is made whole with that too. But it's an important industry that for mutual aid. If we need help in a certain situation, we have to be able to help each other out. And that's that redundancy factor too. So again, if we were to lose this or lose the other one, we'd have other connections with our nires to get water here.
Which brings up, because we haven't experienced here in a number of years, but certainly California's experienced wildfires, and we had that bad Laguna fire those years ago. So this might be of use in that? I mean, would we send them water to help them fight the fire, or does it work that fast?
Not quite, but when you look at a water system, one of its primary functions is actually having fire flow out of the fire hydrants, and all of these homes and businesses, for their sprinklers to be able to work, their fire sprinklers, and for all the fire hydrants to work, you got to have a supply of water that we can pump through the system and get there for the fire. So that's one of the most important functions of a water system, is fire flow as well too. So
we don't think of it that way, but yes, obviously it's critical.
Absolutely, and that's why we have a real important partnership with our fire department and making sure the pressures are adequate for them. We think of water pressure for our showers and how much how much do I want spitting on me when I'm taking a shower too, but we set those pressures based on elevations to make sure that there's enough fire flow pressure, so when they need it for the fire hydrants, it's ready for them.
Yeah, well, good. Well, this has been a fun visit. I wish everybody could come out here, but we're having you said you might have a 60th birthday party, and maybe at least a cake or something.
It's on my mind. It's on my mind. I mean, 60 years old, for this facility and how important it is, it's worth celebrating and taking a time out, and so we're looking at that. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I keep feeling like I'm going to fall over.
I know. Well, we got to do some more walking. Let's take you a little further down the middle. Ed, can you follow us?
Mark was mentioning something which I think is interesting. Why don't we keep it all the way to the top?
This is a large reservoir for our service area. So it's great to have in case of an emergency, but if we kept it full all the time with the amount of water usage you have in the city, the water would sit in the reservoir for a long period of time. You always want to have that water being turned over, keeping it fresh. So the max capacity of this reservoir is 600 acre-feet. We typically keep it anywhere from 250 up to 400 acre-feet is the normal operating range. So we have it near 400 during the summer and in between 250 and 300 during the winter.
So your staff gets good data on usage, so you can really calculate that well.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's what Casey and his team for water production, they're focused on making sure we have the right amount of water in storage, the right quality, all the testing and inspection that needs to be done for basically the delivery of the water system, and that's what his group focuses on. And of course, they do a great job here too, but it's just fascinating, and you see Casey's knowledge base on this, and that of all the staff members there too in utilities. They have to know the ins and outs of our water system and how to make sure it's safe and it works and it's redundant, and just those little things like how much should we keep in the reservoir? Okay, now we're going into the winter season. We're not using as much. Let's start lowering it again.
Well, most of us never think about this. We turn on the tap and the water comes out and we go, of course, what else? But now you have a little bit of insight into all of the intricacies of providing that, what happens when you turn that tap. But great water quality, great drinking water quality, thanks to your work, thanks to our wells and our previous councils and everything. So this is the Big Canyon Reservoir, 60 years old this year. And that's our show. Until next time, let's all work on keeping our village green.